let's talk about some of these films. And we agreed to just go in chronological order because we couldn't think of a better way to do it for the most part. So the first film we saw, one of my favorites of the festival, Sound City.
Sound City, yeah.
Sound City is the film directed by Dave Grohl, who, if you don't know his name, it's just because you're not into music. I'm not into music. I know his name.
Right.
He's the front man for the Foo Fighters right now. He was the drummer for Nirvana.
Yeah.
So he's got some chops.
He's got quite a bit of chops.
He's been around in the history of music. He will be remembered generations from now.
Yeah.
But he directed this film, and it kind of starts out as like a documentary of this sound recording studio called Sound City.
Right.
And it's really... And then it kind of gets tied into this whole idea of this one board, this one soundboard, this piece of equipment that almost takes on like this mythical quality where it's like, here's how much better it sounds on this board versus anywhere else you can go.
Right.
And then it gets into digital versus tape in the music industry, which is interesting because we've been hearing this argument for years in the movie world. This is the first time I've ever heard about it in the music world.
Sure. And had a valid arguments to back up both.
Exactly. And then it really gets into what it means to be a musician.
Right.
And like, how do you make a song? How do you make an album? What goes into it? And I found it brilliant because it made me want to play music.
Yeah.
It made me want to be in those rooms and have those experiences with those artists. And you know, it really got even deeper than what it means to be a musician. What does it mean to be an artist?
Yeah.
How do you collaborate with another person on a piece of art, you know?
Yeah, I mean, in the times that, we're talking about sort of jamming, it's like you hear that all the time, like, I went and jammed with my buddies. They do that, and they create these songs pretty much from scratch.
Yeah.
And you're just like this is brilliant because essentially Dave plays with a lot of the members of his current band, Foo Fighters. So we've got, Pat Smear, Chris Novoselic, who was an original member of Nirvana, is like a car salesman now, but every now and then we'll just like, I'm back on bass, and he can just whip it out and be perfectly fine with that.
Yeah.
Taylor Hawkins, who's the drummer for Foo Fighters, also has a band of his own. And then you start bringing in all these other people. You've got Paul McCartney, you've got Rick Springfield.
Literally every famous musician.
And then all these people have a connection to Sound City.
Exactly.
So you've got that, and then you've got
well, and that's the amazing thing. He sort of and by the way, Dave Grohl was there.
Yeah, he showed up.
Let's not downplay that.
Yeah,
he was
that was
there.
Unexpected.
And I don't know, does he live in Austin or does he live in LA? Or?
No, I'm pretty sure he lives in LA.
Okay. It seemed like they accepted him as a local. I don't know if that's just because
I know he's played
such
South
a big
by
music guy.
a ton of times.
Yeah. Anyways,
it's ridiculous the amount of times he's probably been there.
Yeah.
In the 20 years they've done it.
But he talked about after the film, he talked about how sort of the first rule was like, if you've played at Sound City, you can be in the documentary, which seems like a really restrictive rule. But then you have Tom Petty, Stevie Nicks, like everyone from Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah.
Rumors was recorded at that.
Yeah.
Rumors is one of the best albums of all time. And it's like this little dinky studio that they're talking about.
Yeah.
And it's just so many like I haven't been into music lately, but I was really into music when I was younger, and I focused on stuff from the 70s and 60s and stuff like that. I recognized like all of these artists and all of these songs. Once it got into like the Rage Against the Machine era, I started to get a little lost.
Sure.
But it's just fascinating, this movie, how it sort of tracks the history of this studio. And like it was huge after Rumors, and it did okay, and then it sort of declined. And then Nirvana hit, and then it was huge again for another 20 years. So it's just so well put together. And Dave at the end of the movie was like, yeah, I'm not really a director. I don't really know what I'm doing. It's like, Dave Grohl, you're a director.
Yeah, he knows what he's doing.
Like, you can't just show up and do that, all right?
He's master control of his career. He knows exactly what he's doing and has a lot of fun doing it at the same time. So, he came out and essentially sort of talked a little bit about, the digital versus analog argument, because it was funny. A lot of people sort of asked him, well, why didn't you shoot this on film if you were recording things on tape? Because that's what it was. The album, the last Foo Fighters album was recorded on analog. It might have been recorded on that same board.
Yeah.
Because essentially what they did was they recorded the album, mastered it, and then cut it up into a billion pieces and then put it inside each album that you could buy, which was cool. So like you see these huge strips of tape in the movie. I have one of those pieces.
Oh, cool.
Which is really cool. And if I were to like find a way of playing it, there would be some element of a song on that, which is pretty cool to think about. But then, you know, he's like, well, we did shoot it on digital. And he's just like, whatever, we shot it on digital. Just shut up. You know, he's just like, you know, he just has this very like fun attitude of just like, you know what, we just did it this way and, you know, we can talk about it. And he was actually the keynote speaker the next day at the interactive part of the festival, which was really cool. And I've actually gone and watched sort of that sort of conference that he did. And there was a lot of other great stuff to chew on. And we also had a little bit of audio from. The funny thing was, you know, I tried to make an attempt at every Q&A after each film to record some audios for notes and stuff, and I just found myself like sitting there just like,
well,
then I realized like, 10 minutes later, I need to pull out my recorder and start recording this.
Yeah. Well, let's be clear. Your favorite band is
the Foo Fighters.
The Foo Fighters.
Sure.
So this wasn't like
it was a big deal.
This wasn't like, oh, well, it's Dave Grohl. For me, it's like, oh, Dave Grohl, cool. He's pretty famous.
No, it was.
For you, it's like he's the guy.
He's the guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's the guy for me. And just like what you see is what you get with him.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's just every element that I've seen him in. It's just like
there was we might see if we can clean up that audio and post it because there was a lot of really great moments. Somebody asked a question and there was like, "Can you talk technically about how the board was put together?" And he was like, "Can I?"
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Next question.
Next question. Yeah. He knows what he knows and he doesn't doesn't sort of go by. But I had seen it previous to the festival, so I can sort of compare it to, okay, I'm watching it sort of, you know, in the environment that I saw it in, and then I saw it with an audience in a theater. You absolutely have to see it with an audience in a theater. And honestly, if this manages to come to the cinema, I can't imagine that this movie will not sound the best it will ever sound in the theater.
In the theater that we saw it in the Paramount.
It was nice.
It's a nice theater. It looks a lot like the Buskirk Chumley. It's sort of laid out in a similar fashion with like a balcony and stuff. And it sounded amazing in that theater. I saw several other movies that later there in the week. Nothing sounded as good as Sound City. So I don't know if the Paramount has like a sort of decent sound system or a great sound system, but I know the cinema has an amazing sound system.
It's nice, but it's not the IU cinema by any means. So
because I mean, they were talking about things like, oh well, this is the drum room, and listen to how the drum sounds on this, and you could hear it. I mean, it sounded like really good. So Sound City.
It's full of nostalgia. I mean,
absolutely.
if what I wrote down in my notes is I said if you've ever sort of, you know, rocked your head to a song or tapped your foot to a song, you absolutely have to see this movie. Otherwise, you're not human. You're just not human, because I can't imagine a person would watch this movie have not recognized at least one of the artists featured in the movie.
Absolutely.
I would be blown away if someone was like, I had no idea what any of that music featured was. This is like, then you're not a human.
Yeah.
You've been kept in a bubble your whole life.
And it doesn't matter if you're our age or older than us or younger than us. Some of this music is going to hit you.
Yeah.
Because it's all encompassing. It's all encompassing.
Yeah.
It covers 50 years of music history.
Yep.
A Place for Film is recorded at WFIU Studios in Bloomington, Indiana.